review.
Time. You're late. I'm not
Watching it.
Raindrops are falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed.
So I went and saw this little indie film recently. You might not have heard of it. It's called Spider-Man: No Way Home. Yeah, it only made like $1.5 billion in like 2 seconds, something like that. Last I checked, it was every human being on Earth, except all the people that live in China, have seen this movie. Sorry that your government is authoritarian. Sorry. So needless to say, it's a massive success financially, especially considering how much the movie business has been sagging since the coronavirus pandemic. I'm gonna go into spoilers in this review because you've seen it, you've already seen the movie. If you're here, you've definitely already seen it. And if you haven't, you've had more than enough time to go and see it, and you can click off right now if you really feel like it. And also, it's kind of impossible to talk about this movie without spoiling it because the entire premise is like a major spoiler. So, Jon Watts was the director of No Way Home. He was the director of the first 2 Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. I enjoyed Homecoming. I thought it was good. It's not my favorite Marvel movie, and it's definitely not my favorite Spider-Man film, but I really enjoyed it. It was good. It was serviceable. And then Far From Home, while there are many things to appreciate about Far From Home, and it's obviously made by like incredible professionals who have a lot of technical proficiency, there's still something about the story of Far From Home that feels slightly more generic and less interesting than Homecoming or No Way Home. And I'll definitely say that No Way Home is for sure my favorite of these 3 Jon Watts, Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. I think it's the best one. So yeah, No Way Home really recaptured my attention in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I really liked kind of the classic Phase 1 Marvel stuff like Captain America and the first Iron Man. Love the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I think those are great. Love Infinity War and Endgame was really great. Endgame was kind of this point with the MCU where I thought that I was done. Once I saw Endgame, I thought, yep, and that's the end of my interest in the MCU. I don't see how they could possibly make me care about anything in this universe ever again. It's kind of like Star Wars, like after the Death Star is destroyed and the Empire is defeated, it's like I just kind of lost interest, and it's part of the reason that I didn't like the new Disney Star Wars movies. That and The Mouse is Satanic.
The mouse is satanic. The mouse is satanic.
But yeah, basically, as soon as Endgame was done, I thought I was done. And I thought I would never give a shit about anything in the Marvel universe ever again. Spider-Man: No Way Home changed that. Obviously, the big thing with this movie is the multiverse, the exciting new concept about which we know frighteningly little, which I really like that phrase because it kind of implies that there's a whole labyrinth of ideas that they've got in the works for this concept, and I'm very excited for it. But so the multiverse is in this movie. Peter goes to Doctor Strange to get some magic to help him with his problem. It's the starting point that kind of shows the change that he goes on, where in the beginning, he sees how him being Spider-Man has hurt his friends, but he doesn't want to lose his relationship with them. He couldn't let go of that to free them from what he perceives to be the burden that he causes them. But that's the change that happens to him by the end. Because by the end, he's not desperately, nervously clinging on to those relationships anymore. He's out of maturity, letting them go for the sake of their own benefit, because his care for them has risen above even his desire to be a part of their life, which is like the real definition of mature love. So I think that theme and the power of that theme is what has made the movie so broadly popular and has made it appeal to so many people. MJ in this movie is really great. I mean, I've never been the biggest fan of Zendaya's MJ or her performance of it. It just seems like very jaded and very F you, she's too cool for anything kind of performance. And I get that, she's this young, very attractive, punky, kind of aesthetic that they're going for with this character, and that's very popular, it's very trendy, and so I understand why they do that, but I just didn't love her characterization before. She didn't feel as emotionally grounded or as human almost as the other characters. She almost felt too cool to be real.
Can't believe you guys are at this lame party.
You're here too.
Am I?
But in this movie, they tap into her insecurities in a way that really humanized her and made her a more interesting character for me to follow. And I think that it's Zendaya's best performance in any of these Spider-Man movies. I think she does a good job with that more vulnerable side. She has this kind of nervous pitteringness when she kind of admits that she feels insecure a little bit. She does it way better than I'm doing it right now. But it's endearing, and it shows that she has this, that vulnerability is the hook of empathy that allows people to connect with her part of the story, and I think that they did a really clever job with that. I absolutely loved the sequence with Doctor Strange and Peter fighting in the mirror dimension, or whatever it's called, the Doctor Strange kaleidoscope acid trip universe that they went and fought in. The effects and the choreography, the fight choreography for that sequence was just so inspiring and surreal and really, really cool. Like, I was just totally engrossed both times during that part of the movie. I forgot completely where I was, and I was just inside of it, super enjoying it. Yeah, Aunt May and Happy have this funny little dynamic. I mean, I think that it almost is kind of a bad reflection on the Aunt May character for me personally, that she just uses this guy and just fucking throws away his heart and doesn't give a shit about him, and it's played for laughs, and so it is kind of funny. I actually don't like this Aunt May character. I don't think she's a very good character. I don't think she was in the first two Jon Watts Spider-Man movies, and I don't think that really changed very much in this one, for me personally. They do an interesting thing with her where they kind of make her the source of this idea for Peter that he needs to save the villains. And I appreciated that, but again, it didn't feel like it didn't feel like it necessarily matched up with the character that was from the previous two movies, but it didn't bother me very much. I mean, it was serviceable for the movie, again. But yeah, just not the hugest fan of this Aunt May character. She's not terrible, and the actress who plays her is obviously very beautiful, very talented. Yeah, just didn't do too much for me. Not a huge fan. So, the thing to talk about with the movie, the villains and the heroes from the previous Spider-Man movies coming in as characters from alternate dimensions into the MCU. It's such an ambitious idea. It's such a gamble in a way, and I really respect them for doing it, and I think that they really, really pulled it off, which was surprising because when I had heard that this was possible, that this was in the works, that it was going to be this crossover, I didn't picture it going as smoothly as it did, because I thought it was going to have this Matrix Resurrections problem. Like, if you saw my review of The Matrix Resurrections, you know that I didn't like that movie. And the reason mainly that I didn't like it was because it felt like the filmmakers didn't do anything to get you to care about the characters and the events that were happening in The Matrix Resurrections. You were meant to care about everything in that movie only because of your investment from the previous movies. And I was really, really scared that the same thing was going to happen to this movie, that it was going to be, yeah, Tobey Maguire's in the movie, but if you didn't see the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, then it would be totally pointless and seem super weird, and there would be nothing to latch onto with him. And the same with Andrew Garfield. No Way Home successfully did everything that The Matrix Resurrections didn't do successfully, in my opinion. It played off of nostalgia. It brought in elements from other old properties and reinvigorated them with this new perspective and this new reason to care about all of it. And knowing about the old stuff isn't the way that you get hooked. Like, a perfect example would be Andrew Garfield and his character. In this movie, in No Way Home, he has an arc. He's a regretful guy who is heroic and kind, but he lost the girl that he loves, and it haunts him. and and he decides to help somebody else who's experiencing tragic loss, and he manages to rescue Tom Holland's MJ, and in that kind of sense gets a redemption for himself. And you didn't need to see the Amazing Spider-Man movies to feel why that was impactful. Like, I don't like the Amazing Spider-Man movies, but one of the most impactful scenes for me was when Andrew Garfield swung down and caught MJ, and he like almost cried about it, because he felt like he had redeemed himself and made up for what he felt was the biggest mistake in his life. And it's like, man, that's a really powerful arc for such a small character. Like, they did it with so little time and such little screen time, and he's completely characterized in this way and given this beautifully tragic but redemptive arc in this movie. And you wouldn't have even need to have seen the Amazing Spider-Man movies to feel and appreciate that. That's the difference between No Way Home and Matrix Resurrections. So yeah, I was a huge fan of Andrew Garfield in this movie. I thought that he was great. All the love that he's getting for his job as Spider-Man, I think, is totally justified, because he's just super charismatic, very, very lovable, charming in the role of Peter Parker and as Spider-Man. As a person who didn't like those Amazing Spider-Man movies, I could always appreciate and see that Andrew Garfield was extremely talented, extremely fitting for the role of Spider-Man. And then they bring in Tobey Maguire, and Tobey Maguire's character is like an older mentor kind of character that he's established as. It's subtle, but that's the characterization that they go with for him. They call him a youth pastor at one point, and it's a joke, but I also think it's kind of a subtle, clever way of establishing what his role as a mentor is going to be in the story. His arc is about helping Tom Holland, because like from the very beginning, the first thing that he says is, I feel like he needs my help. That was the core of his character, that he was there to help this other version of himself. And the finishing part of his arc is when he stops Peter from stabbing Willem Dafoe, Green Goblin, with his own glider. Again, I think you didn't need to see the old movies to appreciate what that arc meant. The Green Goblin is another great example of how it's not about being invested in the previous movies, even though they are bringing in these elements from these previous movies, and having seen the old ones adds this other layer of enjoyment on top of what's already in the movie for you to enjoy. Because the Green Goblin, if you see the original Spider-Man movie, which I did just recently, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin character is arguably not super consistent with the way that he's portrayed in No Way Home, because in No Way Home he's established as this very sympathetic, very in need of rescue kind of character. He almost looks like a wounded puppy during the scene where he's sitting with Aunt May in this big cozy coat and they're sitting eating donuts, and he almost looks cute in a way. And that's again the hook for the Green Goblin character in this movie isn't, oh, you remember him from the old movie, that's why you care. That's not the hook. The hook is seeing him sitting there looking like a cute puppy with Aunt May, and that hook of empathy when he's like, I in my head, sometimes I disappear and I don't know where I go, and it's terrible. And that's the hook. That's what gets you empathetically caring about him as this victim of mental illness, of this horrible thing that has destroyed his mind and made him act in a way that is against this better part of his nature that we can see. And it's the thing that it's important for us to care about him in that way, because that ties into his role in this movie. Again, it's got nothing to do with the old movies, except if you've seen the old movies, there's just a new layer of things to appreciate and enjoy about it. Like that great shot of his mask all destroyed and he's walking away from it is an homage to when Peter threw his Spider-Man mask in the trash and he walked away from it. Having seen the old movie provides that kind of context, and again, just adds that layer of enjoyment to the story. But it's not necessary, and it's not the hook that makes you care about it. I saw videos titled how No Way Home gets nostalgia right, And I agree with the sentiment of that idea. I really do think that in this age of nostalgia and of self-referential kind of content, No Way Home is a much better way of achieving that than something like Matrix Resurrections. I really liked the way that they handled the Doc Ock character. I think that he was just one of my favorite parts of the movie. I think he's the second best of the villains, the highlight obviously being Willem Dafoe, who just steals the show and is fabulous. Then the other villain characters I'm actually a little lukewarm on. This is kind of the biggest criticism in terms of things to enjoy about the movie. I would say that, the Sandman villain is half-baked. The Jamie Foxx Electro villain is half-baked. And the Lizard villain, I don't even know his name. That's the thing, yeah. He's totally half-baked. So lots of the villain, they did bite off a little more than they could chew, in my opinion, with the amount of villains that they threw in the movie. Because some of them just felt like you could have taken them out and it wouldn't have been any different. The first time I saw the movie, I didn't know this. If you go back and watch the movie again, pay attention to this and you'll probably notice. They don't show the actor who plays Sandman at all in the movie. He's just that sand textured CGI the entire time. And if you listen really closely, his voice doesn't sound quite right. At least it didn't sound like it was the same person to me. It might be the same person. I might just be wrong about that and he just is older. But either way, they definitely couldn't get the actor on set to record any of it because the only footage of his face and of him in costume that is used in the movie is very clearly comped old footage, maybe unused footage from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 3. It definitely was not originally produced for No Way Home. And if you watch it again and pay close attention, you might notice that. In fact, I'm actually curious if I can find out a little bit of the story as to why that all happened. Yeah, it's me from the future. Turns out I was right, and the Sandman actor, because of a number of things, wasn't really able to be a part of the production, and it seems like he wasn't actually credited in the movie. There's no credit for him for the entire movie, so I guess they probably didn't use his voice. I'm not sure. It didn't sound like him to me. But I found an article that explains that the same thing is actually true of the actor who plays the Lizard villain. Again, I don't know this lizard's name. The actor who played him apparently wasn't credited as well, and the shots of his face at the very end, according to this article, are said to be comped from the Amazing Spider-Man movie as well. Maybe I didn't notice it because I'm not as big a fan of the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I just know the Sam Raimi ones better. But either way, I was right about the Sandman, and it looks like they also did it with this lizard guy also.
What does it matter to you anyway?
It was, for the most part, successful because I didn't even notice it the first time. But upon a second viewing it did stand out to me a little bit. But so yeah, that is a criticism for sure, is that a few of the villains are half-baked and not quite as interesting. There were some really great shots in the movie. I mean, it has that kind of flat Marvel look for sure, but one moment in particular that really stands out that I feel like I need to mention is that amazing shot between Tom Holland and Zendaya kissing in the sunset. And there's just something about the way that they captured the lighting for that shot that was just like so gorgeous and so romantic. It was a moment of like cinematography and traditional film craft that impacted me in a way that most Marvel movies are kind of more flat and standard in general. But I really appreciated that visual touch to the climax, because that was the biggest emotional impact of the entire story for me, and it happened to be the most beautiful shot in the entire movie. And I think that that combination really makes for a powerful moment. Again, like The Matrix Resurrections, No Way Home has kind of a meta aspect to its storytelling, but where in The Matrix Resurrections it was just kind of a lazy, half-concealed way for Lana Wachowski to talk about her frustrations with Hollywood and about not wanting to make the new movie in general. The meta commentary in No Way Home can be read from the perspective of just a part of the story. You don't need to know the meta commentary that it's actually making to appreciate what's being said. Like, the perfect example is Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man character saying that he's like kind of crappy and he's like down on himself, you know? And it's like, this has two different meanings. In the No Way Home movie, it's been established that Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man character is kind of haunted by regret and probably does have a hard time holding himself in high esteem or in good esteem. And so this line makes sense as an expression of that character and that characterization that's been established. But also, the meta commentary of that line is about the failure of the Amazing Spider-Man franchise and about how it was slated to continue on, but it ended up not going on. It's kind of addressing the public reception of the Amazing Spider-Man movies. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm not that great. But Tobey Maguire goes, no, you're amazing. That's the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is the mentor, encourager to both Tom Holland and now to Andrew Garfield. So the line makes sense from that perspective. But again, from this meta perspective, it also has the benefit of being a funny joke in reference to the fact that, you know, Andrew Garfield comes from the Amazing Spider-Man movie series. It does all of the nostalgia bait kind of stuff that The Matrix Resurrections did, but it avoided every mistake that Lana Wachowski and the writers of that movie fell into, and instead made the meta aspect of No Way Home and made the previous movies that it's bringing into this universe, it made those things not the hook. It created these layers of enjoyment for the story that it's like, yeah, no, there is just a basic story there. You could watch this movie out of context from any of the MCU movies. You'd probably be confused as to why certain things are happening, but you could follow the emotional thread of the story. And I really do believe that you would still feel many of the intended feelings that the filmmaker wanted you to experience. That's the way to do this kind of nostalgia stuff. That's the way to do it successfully. I'll talk briefly about a couple negative things for me. Like I said, some of the villains are half-baked. The visual style of the movie can kind of have that flat Marvel look to it. The soundtrack and the score wasn't particularly memorable. It was serviceable. I think it did just enough, but, you know, that could be considered a criticism. And, you know, the logical inconsistencies are very, very large, and the plot holes are very, very large, to the point where I think you could argue that this is what makes it difficult. There are some people who nitpick superhero movies and like fantasy type things to death, where it's like you're missing the point by nitpicking the realism of certain aspects of the story. That's distracting from the point of the story. You're working needlessly against it sometimes. That's one end of the spectrum. But then on the other end of the spectrum is sometimes things can just be so nonsensical and not internally logical that it's distracting and makes it seem like, well, this is kind of meaningless because anything, a random thing could happen at any point. And I think you could argue that the logic and the plot holes of this movie are gaping enough to where they lean a little bit on that side of being distracting. At least that was my experience watching it the first time, and it's why I felt less positive about it the first time that I saw it. But having seen it again, I don't think that it's out of step with the tone of the movie overall and with, you know, the previous things that have happened in Marvel movies. There's Infinity Stones and you snap your finger and all the people die, but they can all come back. And it's, you know, it's all magic. It's all guff in a certain sense. What's important is the emotional journey. But yeah, no, this is the part where normally I would talk about recommendations, but there's no point in recommending this movie. Everyone's already seen it. You've seen it. So yeah, I recommend that you see it like you have. I'm going to give Spider-Man No Way Home an 8 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's a really great movie, and there's tons of great artistry, tons of great acting, tons of great effects, and fun action sequences, and great jokes, and lots of entertaining moments. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys. Thanks for watching. Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Geek out about Spider-Man all day long. If you like this video, please leave a like. If you want to see more reviews, please subscribe and listen to a grown man talk about another grown man in spandex suit with spiders on it, shoot webs out of little tiny machines that make him fly around like Superman. Why was I complaining about the logic? But yeah, that's all I have for you guys. See ya.
Pizza time.